What if I told you that the delicious, comforting dishes we now know as soul food originated from the scraps of a brutal past? How did the remnants of slavery transform into a celebrated cuisine that embodies resilience and cultural pride? Hey everyone, welcome to Aggressive Intelligence. Join us as we explore the extraordinary journey of slave food evolving into soul food, a narrative steeped in history, creativity, and survival. Let's uncover the powerful story behind soul food's evolution. Long before soul food existed were the diverse culinary traditions of West and Central Africa. These nations sported a rich array of ingredients and cooking methods that would form the bedrock of what we now understand as soul food. Staples like yams, okra, black-eyed peas, and rice sat at the heart of many African diets. One-pot meals, stewing in palm oil, along with a variety of spices, were common techniques of cooking. When millions of Africans were forcibly brought to America during the Atlantic slave trade, they took more than just their bodies with them. They had their cultural knowledge, including culinary expertise. Although slavery was despicable, these people found a way to preserve their food traditions and adapt them to their new environment and the limited resources they encountered in America. At the same time, this ensured the preservation of the culinary heritage from the practice. Life on plantations was marked by strict limitations in food. Plantation owners barely provided minimum rations to the slaves, which typically consisted of cornmeal, salted fish, and minute portions of vegetables. Frederick Douglass gave the following account in his autobiography regarding the meager provisions offered for slaves to eat: 8 pounds of pork, or its equivalent in fish, and 1 bushel of cornmeal per month. This ration barely kept adults alive and working. These meager rations were supplemented by whatever the enslaved could scrounge. They gathered wild plants and hunted small game and fished when they could. A few were even permitted to have small garden plots where they grew vegetables. These gardens were an oasis of sustenance, but also a source of pride, a way for the enslaved to exert a modicum of control over what they ate. Perhaps the biggest adaptation was using parts of animals that were simply thrown away by slave owners. Intestines became chitterlings or chitlins. Pig feet, ears, and tails became tasty dishes. Even dandelion greens and pokeweed, considered weeds by owners, were added to the diet. This resourcefulness paved the way for many soul food staples. Preparing chitterlings required significant cleaning and cooking to make them edible, and enslaved people seasoned them with herbs and spices to create a savory dish. Chitterlings became a staple in soul food and are still eaten today, especially in the southern United States. Ham hocks are the lower part of a pig's leg, near the foot. They are a tough, fatty cut of meat with little muscle, so they were often discarded by slaveholders. Enslaved people slow-cooked ham hocks, often using them to flavor stews, soups, and greens. This practice continues in many traditional southern dishes, where ham hocks are used to add a rich, smoky flavor to collard greens, black-eyed peas, and beans. Like other tough cuts of meat, pig feet required long cooking times to become tender. Enslaved people would braise or boil them and season them heavily to make them more palatable. Pig feet are still considered a delicacy in some Southern and African American communities. Tripe, the edible lining of a cow's stomach, was another part of the animal that slave owners often discarded. Enslaved people used tripe to make dishes like stews and soups, often slow cooking it to soften the tough texture. Tripe is still a common ingredient in many traditional dishes around the world, including African and Latin American cuisines. Oxtails are the tails of cattle, and though they were once considered undesirable, they were commonly given to enslaved people. Oxtails are bony and have a high fat content, but with long, slow cooking, they become tender and flavorful. Oxtail stew, a rich and hearty dish, has its roots in the creativity of enslaved cooks and remains a beloved dish in soul food cuisine today. Organ meats, such as liver, kidneys, and heart, were often given to enslaved people as part of their rations. These cuts were nutritious and could be made into flavorful dishes when prepared with the right techniques and seasonings. Liver and onions, for example, became a popular dish that is still enjoyed in some African American households. The diet of the enslaved was restricted as a means of control. Owners would try to keep the enslaved captives weak and dependent by limiting the food. Yet, it is in the ingenuity displayed through the making of nourishing meals from scraps that it became at once a testament to their resilience and fundamental tenet of creativity for enslaved African Americans. The ability to make something out of nothing became the trademark of soul food cuisine. The harsh realities of plantation life dictated that cooking methods be efficient. One-pot meals became the norm, easy to prepare and able to stretch very few ingredients into a meal. Tough cuts of meat and vegetables cooked in unison formed flavorful, filling stews. This is an extremely old method from West African cooking traditions that endures as central to soul food today. Seasoning was paramount in transforming plain ingredients into filling meals. Hot peppers, onions, and garlic were freely used. Bacon grease or lard imparted flavor and calories to foods. These strong flavors were a necessity and a tie to the motherland of Africa's rich culinary heritage. Preservation techniques were essential to make the food available throughout the year. Smoking and salting of meat, pickling of vegetables, and drying herbs further elongated the life of the meager amount of food supplies the enslaved people received. These methods influenced the development of dishes like country ham and chow chow relish. The open hearth or fire pit was central to the cooking process. Cast iron cookware, especially that of the Dutch oven variety, became indispensable. These heavy pots withstood long hours of cooking and held heat well. That turned tough pieces of meat tender. This versatility of cast iron for frying, baking, and stewing was quite important in soul food preparation. These were not mere adaptations to survive, but acts of cultural preservation. When conserving methods of cooking from their homelands and creatively using ingredients available, enslaved African Americans continued their culinary traditions under the most difficult circumstances. Enslaved people could own chickens while being prohibited from owning cattle reflects the complex dynamics of slavery and property rights in the antebellum South. This minor allowance proved to have significant implications for diet and economy alike. Chickens were considered of negligible economic importance compared to larger livestock like cattle, pigs, and horses. Because of this, slave owners often allowed enslaved individuals to keep chickens for personal use, as it reduced the plantation's feeding costs and provided enslaved people with a source of food and a small measure of autonomy. More importantly, they offered a certain amount of economic freedom to enslaved people. The enslaved could sell their eggs or chickens, therefore offering a small but important source of income for them. This money could be used to purchase additional food, clothing, or even, in some cases, contribute to buying one's freedom. It is from this time frame that one can really trace the real cultural significance of chicken in soul food. Fried chicken became a Sunday dinner or church gathering type food. This provided pride to be able to serve chicken and became symbolic of resourcefulness and culinary skill. This tradition carries through to this day with chicken as a celebratory food in soul food cuisine. As chattel slavery was coming to an end, cooking techniques and flavor profiles created by enslaved African Americans began to spread to parts of the nation they hadn't reached before. Many formerly enslaved people continued to work as cooks during Reconstruction, introducing their culinary traditions to a wider audience. During the Great Migration of the 20th century, millions of African Americans moved from the rural South to urban areas in the North and West, bringing along their cooking traditions to new locations and opening restaurants and food establishments that provided familiar Southern dishes. The term soul food did not come into being until the 1960s as part of the Black Power movement. It was about reclaiming a cuisine born of struggle and celebrating it as a source of cultural pride. Soul food now meant more than sustenance. It was about hooking the self to history, symbolizing resilience, and tastefully claiming an African American identity. Many soul food classics are directly traceable to the antebellum South plantation kitchens. Cornbread represents a soul food staple that is easily traced directly back to the simple ash cakes that had been prepared by enslaved people. Often, these would be cooked directly on hot stones or in ashes from a fire. As such, today's golden, crispy-edged cornbread can be related to those humble beginnings. Greens, collards, mustard, and turnip were indispensable in the slave diet. Packed with nutrition and easy to grow, they supplied important vitamins and minerals often missing in the meager rations. Cooking greens for flavor with pork became common. This method of seasoning vegetables with meat remains a hallmark of soul food cooking. Dishes like Hoppin' John of black-eyed peas and rice are a product of both African and slave cuisine. Many enslaved Africans were familiar with rice as a crop that they had cultivated in their homelands. Now, Combined with black-eyed peas, it became a really good, nutritious, and filling meal. This history spawned the tradition of eating black-eyed peas on New Year's Day for good luck. Sweet potato pie has often been called the sister to pumpkin pie. It was born of the abundant sweet potato crop in the South by cooks enslaved in European kitchens who adapted European custard pie using this familiar ingredient. The result is uniquely African-American dessert and soul food favorite to this day. Soul food restaurants can be found in every state in America, serving as custodians for this culinary tradition. The majority of these eating establishments are family-operated and are very effective in preserving recipes and styles of cooking that have been passed from one generation to another. They are not restaurants, but rather living museums of African-American food history. However, the rich, often fatty nature of traditional soul food has lent itself to serious health concerns in recent times. This means that the diet partially contributes to the prevalence of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease among African Americans. The result has been a movement toward much healthier ways of preparing soul food. Chefs and home cooks alike are finding methods to retain the flavor of soul food without the large amounts of fat, salt, and sugar. This is done by techniques such as using smoked turkey to give greens flavor instead of pork, or baking instead of frying. Even with such changes, soul food remains integral to African American culture. It is present at family reunions, church functions, and celebrations. The preparation and sharing of this food are ways of connecting with heritage and strengthening community ties. Soul food cookbooks and television cooking programs have multiplied, showing sustained interest in this cuisine. But it doesn't stop there. Soul food touches every ethnic group. Its flavors and techniques have become part of the greater American culinary landscape. Dishes like fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, and collard greens are now enjoyed by people of all backgrounds. From the shores of Africa to American kitchens, we have traced the remarkable journey of soul food. It was born of deprivation, shaped by ingenuity, and elevated by pride. It's really a cuisine that tells the story of survival and cultural triumph. We have noted that soul food is so much more than good eats. It's history on a plate, and a testament to the indomitable spirit of people who could turn scraps into sustenance and feeling into culinary art. So the next time you indulge in soul food, recall, you have tasted centuries of history, creativeness, and resilience. Thanks for joining us on Aggressive Intelligence. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below for more in-depth explorations of the stories behind the food we love to eat.